Hello, and welcome to our lesson on crisis management. This segment will cover emergency planning in projects. Emergency planning. Many of the problems discussed in the previous section can be attributed to a lack of preparation. Planning is the key to success of effective crisis management because it helps avoid the damaging chaos that characterizes the early stages of a crisis. The importance of a well-conceived crisis management plan cannot be overstated. Often, organizations think they are prepared for crises because they have reviewed insurance policies, implemented backup computer systems, and installed sprinkler systems. The fact is, all those cannot compensate for the indirect costs of a crisis arising from damaged employee morale and tarnished customer relations. To illustrate this, we can consider as an example the Ford Pinto and Ford's calculated decision to rely on insurance payouts to cover the costs of potential legal suits. This proved a disastrously misguided decision because Ford had to recall 1.5 million cars and pay out compensation claims that were more than 3 times what was anticipated. Furthermore, they became the first American corporation to be indicted on criminal homicide charges, and Ford's reputation for safety was so bad that it ceased production of the model. The most crisis-prepared companies in the world are those operating within relatively high-risk industries such as shipping, nuclear power, chemical processing, airport management, and oil. Many of these industries use crisis planning as part of their long-range strategic planning process, and it often leads to unexpected and indirect benefits, such as new ideas that produce more innovative ways of doing business. Crisis planning highlights interdependencies and weaknesses that may otherwise go unnoticed and can bring people closer together by forcing them to act out and think through extreme scenarios. The aim of an emergency plan. Emergency plans should be constructed prior to a project's commencement and cover major risks in all stages of a construction project from inception to operation. Emergency plans are designed to mitigate the potential damage exacted by crises by enabling the most rapid response. Having a preconceived plan that can be automatically implemented takes away some of the initial pressure and shock associated with the early phases of a crisis. During a crisis, every second counts, and the first few hours are particularly critical. If initial impressions are bad, then an organization will be judged guilty until proven innocent, and in many instances, this can intensify a crisis and accelerate its escalation. Preparing an emergency plan. Many organizations have a permanent disaster committee that is responsible for championing the need for crisis management, identifying current preparedness and vulnerabilities, devising disaster plans, and coordinating people during a crisis. The members of the committee are senior managers, managers from all functional departments, and external professionals who have experience of crisis management, public relations, the law, and physical and mental health issues. The main activity of the Crisis Committee is conducting crisis audits and creating crisis portfolios. A crisis audit assesses an organization's crisis capabilities and identifies the inherent risk factors in its environment, internal activities, technology, infrastructure, and culture that needs to be addressed to improve its crisis preparedness. The first stage in this process is to develop a working definition of a crisis from the organization's viewpoint, and to then identify and rank the types of crises the organization is vulnerable to. This involves learning from past events, looking into the future, and exploring unusual combinations of events that may seem unlikely, but could combine to produce a serious crisis. Another aspect of the Disaster Committee's job is to establish monitoring systems to detect potential crises. The Disaster Committee also develops standard procedures that define precisely who should be involved in a crisis response, what they should be doing, when they should be doing it, and how they should be doing it. Creating a command center. During a crisis, information is constantly being generated from a multitude of sources, and it is critical that it is supplied live to the correct place, at the correct time, and in an understandable format. A key aspect of a disaster committee's job during a crisis is to identify a clear command center that represents a single point of responsibility for decision-making and information management. Such center represents a critical coordination mechanism that helps facilitate a unified crisis management effort, since one of the greatest problems that can emerge during a crisis is the tendency for people to act independently. For example, in the case of a fire emergency, the command center has the responsibility to contact emergency services and to coordinate individual supervisors who are charged with clearing certain areas of the site. In the case of an economic crisis, such as the bankruptcy of a major subcontractor, the command center is responsible for reorganizing work and reemploying another subcontractor. In addition to being of practical importance during a crisis, command centers also play an important symbolic role. This is the end of this segment of our lesson. In the next segment, we will continue discussing emergency planning in projects. This course is presented to you by South Europe College. Thank you for listening, and see you on our next segment.